All right, we're going to get started. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our Conscious Culture. We're calling, I think, this culture conversations, right? To have these discussions about why culture matters and bringing together some brilliant minds, that includes you guys, about talking about culture, which I'm so excited that you're here today. I think I know most everyone, but again, Melanie Boer, culture coach, Indie Consulting is my business. And, our purpose today is really just to connect with leaders who value culture, to share ideas, to make sure that we're recognizing culture as a competitive advantage, because I think we do believe that it's a differentiator for many organizations, and it boosts our organizations up so that we can, rise above others. Today, we just want to have a casual culture conversation. So please feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, hopefully learn a little bit. And, we look forward to kind of having this discussion today. Our special guest is Mr. Steve Van Valin. Steve, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. He's joining us all the way from Philadelphia, or the suburbs of, in Pennsylvania.
And Laura's saying yay and clapping. My camera's not working, folks. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Dr. Laura was having some issues getting her camera working, so she was trying to make that happen. Wait, Laura, are you in Philadelphia too?
I am. Steve's a good buddy of mine.
Awesome. And actually, I know we've got people, we can now say we're across the US, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, but I know we have some people from other cities as well. Steve, will you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Just kind of the Twitter version. So by the way, I'm sorry for wearing the hat here. I had some sun damage that I had reacted to from the medication, so I just thought I'd spare you that. But yeah, I'm the founder of Culturology, and I like to say I work with leaders who believe their people are their most significant competitive advantage. And I like working with people who believe that, because it's really hard to boil the ocean otherwise. And really specialize in employee engagement and collaboration, creative problem solving, and also articulating culture at the higher level. Like what are we really trying to build as a culture? And I guess my original foray into this, Melanie, was I led the culture at QVC, the shopping network. So we had 10,000 employees, just domestically, not more globally. And I witnessed sort of firsthand how culture made an enormous difference in performance for people, and also the way they felt about themselves and their work, and it connected to them, deeply. So, and I launched Culturology after that.
Awesome. And you guys will notice I'm muting just so I can take some notes. So don't feel like I'm leaving you at any moment here. Steve, what's funny about our introduction, you guys will love this. When I first started my business 5 years ago, I loved the name Culturology, and I had thought of the best name ever, right? So I went out and started like Googling, and I was like, oh man, some brilliant person already has the name of that company. And lo and behold, with COVID, I think I just messaged Steve and was like, we need to talk. I want to hear about what you do. And that's how we've kind of, Steve, now we're friends, aren't we? We've become friends over the course of the last year. So.
Yeah, I think we knew we were kindred spirits like within 5 seconds of talking to each other. It's like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I appreciate getting to know you for sure.
Absolutely. Well, so we'd like to do just some introductions. If we could kind of go around, everyone, if you could tell your name, your company, maybe where you're located, because I know we're now across the US here. And the question that I'd love for you to answer as you introduce yourself is, what was kind of that inflection point that shifted your journey, or when you recognized that culture matters? Why does culture matter? Was there something that kind of hit you, or why do you believe that it matters? Okay. Let us go ahead and start with, I'm going to start on my screen here. John, get us started, please.
All right. So just being in different corporations, I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the name of my company is Give to Get. And I recognize there is a deficiency within organizational cultures there's a lack of understanding of what's important to employees. And I believe that each person within an organization has a higher calling and cares about something greater than what they are getting paid to do. And so for me, it was, working at these corporations and just, I'd have ideas, and these ideas would get, basically capped by upper level leaders that just wanted to, just run with their own ideas. And it just really made me realize that, very few organizations out there proactively try to understand what's important to their employees and what their employees' higher calling is, and then take steps to contribute to the missions of their employees. So that was really my own personal experience with the fragmented and the stale environment that corporations can sometimes elicit within their organizational cultures. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, John. All right, let's go to Rachel. You're next.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Rachel. I'm over in Colorado in Castle Rock, a little bit south of Denver. Nobody's ever heard of it. So I'm actually a stay-at-home mum. So my culture is being led by 2 toddlers, so it's disastrous. But I'm just looking to get out there with a career, and I think it's Melanie. I lived very close by to Melanie, and just chatting to Melanie for all those years about culture just completely has drawn me in. So that's where I am at the moment. But otherwise, my background really is in training and compliance in a nutshell, and recruitment.
Rachel, don't sell yourself short. She is one of the most impressive people you will meet. And if, she said she's over in Colorado, but you heard her accent, right? And you were like, I think she's over the pond. But she's just an amazing person. And actually, Alex and I are pulling in and talking with Rachel about how she can help kind of do some of the things that we're doing related to culture more and more, and utilize all her great skills. So Rachel, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Dr. Laura, how about you?
Hi, I'm from Philly. Steve's my neighbor and good friend. I currently am a partner at an new organization last November called Transportation Leadership Workforce Solutions. But my background is 30 years in the healthcare administration space. And although I didn't know it at the time, as I rose through the ranks, my teams were successful, hugely successful, and had been asked why. And my answer is, I just treat them like people. So I learned as I went through my education that it is a cultural thing. How you treat people and how you motivate them and professionally develop them individually is so critical to the team environment. And as I grew in the ranks, I perceived the issue as a leadership one. And that took me to an advanced degree in leadership. So my PhD is in leadership. So very passionate about this, Steve's entire space. And Steve has graciously volunteered to be a facilitator for our group. We're targeting emerging leaders in very challenging industries. Transportation is one, healthcare is another. It makes all the difference. And just a quick quote from Peter Drucker. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's the father of modern management. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And my experience tells me it's absolutely unemphatically the truth. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I love that quote. And of course, we're part of that right now. We're part of that culture eating strategy for breakfast as we have our morning meeting, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right. Paul, how about you?
Yeah, hi, Melanie. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. It's nice to meet all of you this morning and learn about your backgrounds and experiences. I am a long-time HR professional, having worked for in the human resources arena for 40 years. 18 years ago, I started a business called RCSN, Recruiting and Career Services Network, over time, that's evolved to become RCSN Leadership Services. And our services fall under the banners of recruiting and coaching and outplacement and the culture development and professional development. I have a group of 9 independent consultants, Melanie being one of them, who work together and meet once a month for the purpose of talking about business development and finding clients that are beneficial to perhaps Melanie or beneficial to one of the other 8 consultants that comprise our CSN. So I started my firm as a recruiting firm 18 years ago, and we've evolved into these different areas of service over the last 18 months as consultants had an interest in signing on to be independent consultants working with us. So that's the short story about me. Now my culture background is not very deep. I mean, it is and it isn't. I've worked in HR for more than 40 years. So I certainly have a familiarity and understanding of culture, but Melanie has really helped me to learn more about it. And I'm here today to support her in her efforts to launch her book, launch her business, and be successful outright as an independent, as in the consulting business she's in today. So
that's awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. I appreciate your support. And he's also being modest because, you know, with such a recruitment mindset, he knows it's important about getting the right people on the bus, you know, and how important that is to culture. We know that that's key. Thank you for being here. All right. How about Miss Alex? How about you? How you doing this morning?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well. Slugging through the end of the week, and I'm like sleep deprived always. So I am Alex Bowden. I am the CEO and founder of People First Talent and Retention Consulting. And I'm really excited because I stumbled upon Melanie this year, and we've decided to partner on the culture growth of organizations. We both have a major passion there. And I think my introduction to culture came really without realizing that that's what it was. I have a dance background, a professional dance background, and through being on different teams and organizations through, you know, when you're a dancer and you're poor, you work a million jobs. So every single job had different dynamics, and sometimes the company dynamic was not great, but when the team dynamic was really really tight knit, I was always curious about, like, well, why is it that there's no turnover on this team, but there's a ton of turnover on the company? Or, you know, I was just curious about those dynamics. And then when I got into HR and talent development, I started really spending time analyzing that, and, you know, who do I want to bring into an organization? What really fits? Like, what actually matches? What about this organization makes it such? And, you know, what about the team within the organization makes it, you know, what is their culture and environment? I started understanding the words to really describe those things, and really just gaining a deeper understanding of being intentional about it, because it has a huge impact, right? The team of the culture, the team of the organization overall. They're not really separate from one another, but they can make a big difference in terms of employee experience, turnover, everything. So when it's your job and it's your neck on the line to hire and retain people, which is where I started, you start to be very, very intentional about doing it well.
I love that. I think we recognize that importance of the team, Alex. So I love hearing you say that. And we always say culture's felt at the team level, right? It's hard to feel it at those big level, high level organizations, but you feel it at the team level. So I know I introduced myself, and Steve, I'm going to end with you because I'm going to lead into this next piece. But for me, culture really, the reason I knew that it mattered, I feel like I always kind of did, and I liked every job better than the last. My eyes really got open to it, I think, with Macy's, because they did such a great job in focusing on people. But when I got into smaller business, and I know I've told you guys this story before, it was the best place to work moment where, you know, we are excited. I've been working to become a best place to work for 4 years, and kind of making this long story as short as possible. The day of the big event, the CEO decided not to show up, right? And, he kind of said, hey, it's like say soccer, everyone gets a prize. And I had that, heart piercing moment of, that's not true, that this is really something our people are rallying around and they're excited about. And it impacts all these things, right? Our morale and our performance and our turnover. And, there's a huge impact to culture. And when I realized that he and I were never, this was an oil and water situation, I did quickly determine that wasn't going to be a good fit for me. And I quickly herein resigned, hired my replacement, wrote my severance package, and transitioned out over 6 months. I did it in the nicest way possible, but I knew that wasn't for me. And I started my business. So, right, I'm 5 years in the making of creating this work around, culture matters. Let's be intentional about it. And let's help everyone kind of have that moment of, I enjoy work. We spend so much time at work. I'd be lying to say if I didn't think having kids made me realize that even more, right? If I'm going to spend time away from my family, it better be doing something that I love. And so that was kind of the essence of why I decided I needed to work in culture, and I could give it a go and make a living out of it, which has been pretty awesome. Steve, how about you? Give us a little introduction. I know one of the things as we're learning about Steve and some of the work that he's doing, Steve got some great things I call in his toolbox and some tools that he uses, because I think one of the words of the year, if you will, is going to be about belonging, right? How do we create not only meaning in the work that we're doing, meaningful work, but this sense of belonging. And I know that that's one of the great things and some amazing tools that Steve's even got in his back pocket, right, to help move culture forward. So I want to hear a little bit about him and let him kind of tell us a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. The idea of belonging and meaning, we've known this has been important for years now, especially as millennials started entering the workforce, and now Gen Z coming on the heels, sort of coming preloaded already with this idea of like, I want work to have a purpose and meaning. And then at the same time, it's like this confluence where boomers finally, in our older age here, finally started getting it, and Gen Xers as well. So we have all these generations which are focused on purpose and meaning at work. And then you have the turbocharge of COVID hitting, where all of a sudden, and all the research is pointing to the fact that people have done a lot of self-reflection on what's really important to them, and sort of looking at their job and their life in a whole different lens of stepping back and checking it out. So if it was important before COVID, whoa, I mean, we are in an era now that this, I think, is the most significant topic in the world of culture. Let me just, my own personal experience, like understanding culture, I'll just relate it to myself personally. I realized that in certain environments, Steve Van Valin, that's me, I was a high performer. I loved what I was doing. I was taking risks and chance. I'm a creative person. And I would be able to become a high performer and win awards and things like that. In one environment, I left that job, big mistake, to another one that looked more attractive, but my boss and my coworkers and all that were, the culture with that I was immersed in was completely different. I go from high performer to somebody who all of a sudden lost his confidence, lost my psychological safety to take risks. And some of this is on me, all right? I'm not blaming, it's not all about them, but it's my response and reaction to it. Then I went to another one where I was a high performer again. Then I went to another one that, so I'm looking at myself, same person, right? Same, blood coursing through my veins and all, same brain. And how could I be a high performer one place and struggling a little bit with the other? And I recognize that how many people in this world are going through the same thing. I met Dr. Laura at a give back where I talk about people in transition, and we talk about helping them find a culture fit for themselves. And I was amazed when you ask people, like, how many of you have had a job where you literally felt sick putting your keys in the ignition and thinking about driving to work? And you ask them with a raise of hands, and all the hands go up. It's like, whoa, this is a big deal. It's a big deal in terms of performance. Certainly, it's a big deal in terms of the way you feel about yourself, your own self-efficacy, your own confidence, and the way that translates into the home life, certainly a big factor. Now with post-COVID, I'm calling it post-COVID, I want to think positively, is people are realizing that family aspect of work is now been really permanently melded together. So anyway, that's been my own experience. So I'm really, I understand how important it is for people emotionally, and I want my purpose in life is to really help push the tipping point for organizations to be better at that. It's never going to be perfect, but we're getting this. Awareness gives people choices. That's always the thing. Awareness gives people choices, and I think we're becoming more aware. This group right here on this call, we're part of that. We're influencers in this space, and we can help push that tipping point. So happy to be on the call with you to do that. So Melanie, did you want me to share some things where I want to maybe talk about some specific tools?
Absolutely. So I know that one of the things, and I've been learning this through Steve, is he talks about his meaning maker narrative. And I kind of got an introduction to it, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is amazing. And so we need to hear more about this. So I'd love to hear about that specifically.
Okay.
You had a slide. Would you want to share it now, or do you want me to give you control so you can share it when you need to?
Yeah, I don't know if it's popping up now or not, but
One second here.
Can you see that?
I'm making you the co-host.
Okay.
So then I see it. Do you guys see it?
I
Yep.
see it,
I see
Steve.
it.
Okay. All right. We see
Great.
it. You go ahead.
Let me go back a little bit, but so let's talk about this idea of helping people feel, as Melanie talked about, helping them feel like they belong, that they're included. Obviously, like inclusion is one of those things that everyone is really focused in on. And how do we actually do that? And the more I'm in this space, the more I want to give people practical things that they can literally do. Like, not just talk about it philosophically, but like, what can I actually do to make a difference here? And so I want to share with you, I think, one of my best tools to help influence this. But let me just talk about why this is so important at first. Did you realize that 79% of new hires quit their jobs due to lack of appreciation being the main reason? That's right from SHRM. I mean, appreciation is a big deal, and it always has been in terms of feeling like they belong. William James, who was a psychologist and philosopher at Harvard Medical School, I mean, he was a monster there in terms of creating, thought leadership at Harvard. And his analysis, the deepest craving of human nature is the need to be appreciated. That's a pretty humongous statement. That's not like, oh yeah, it's kind of important, something we should consider. It's the deepest craving of human nature, according to him, who has studied human nature. Mother Teresa. Now, if you know anything about Mother Teresa, she spent an incredible amount of time in the slums of Calcutta. Okay, and one of her reflections was, there's more hunger for love and appreciation in the world than bread. Now, she saw a lot of people that needed bread. I mean, you think bread would be on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the bottom, like that's the base, like that's safety. I can live through the next day. And yet she even equated a love and appreciation almost in the same realm. I was blown away by that. And then lastly, we've all seen Maya Angelou's statement here, one of the more famous quotes of all time, talking about this connectivity piece. But people will never forget how you made them feel. So the rhetorical question for leaders at all levels is, how are you making people feel like they belong at work? Like they matter, their work matters, and that they're a smart person and that they're worthy of tapping into and being around on a daily basis. Do we like each other? And then the sort of ultimate leader question is, are you their advocate or are you an antagonist? In other words, if they can look you in the eye, do they know that you are for them or that you're against them? Do they know that? And so how do you influence it? And I just want to share with you one of the tools here. So when we talk about appreciation, this idea of like pulling people into belonging, feeling like they belong and that they matter, it's literally what we say that can make a big difference here. So what's the most low-hanging fruit statement? Melanie, good job, great job. We say it all the time, right? So I know I'm kind of asking the question in jest, but is the idea of saying great job appreciation?
At its lowest
Yeah.
form, probably, right?
Not the most endearing.
Right.
Yeah, probably not. It's a quickie, right? To acknowledge that. I don't think there's anything wrong with the quickie piece, but is there more to the story? And I'm going to just sort of share with you my own personal experience with this. When I started the QVC job, and I'm in charge of, I eventually became in charge of the culture shaping and brand development there. But one of the things that we were doing was trying to teach people how to give appreciation to each other. And I realized that I sucked. Okay, first of all, I'm an introvert, strike one, and I'm not blaming it on being an introvert. Some introverts are phenomenal at it, right? But and I'm a guy. Okay, so again, I'm not labeling all guys as like we're not great with appreciation, but we tend not to be as good. Well, let's just face it. And so introvert guy, and being an introvert, the reason I wasn't able to share appreciation with people, I was worried about how it would come across. Like, does it sound phony? Does it sound contrived? Do I have the words to say it? It feels a little mushy to me, like to be able to like share that with people. And here I am, I'm teaching this subject, and when we taught things, we had to go through it ourselves. And I got my zone of comfort stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched until I started feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. But I still wasn't completely there until I started thinking about like, well, how else can I tell the story? Because just saying what I appreciate about you and then filling in the blank, it still felt a little nebulous. So here's some other ways of framing how you can appreciate somebody. And it doesn't have to be the word appreciate. I'm getting very literal here with the words that we select and use. You can say what I value about you, what I respect, what I enjoy, what I am amazed by working with you, what I'm thankful for. People showing that gratitude. You know what I'm energized by when I work with you? What I'm inspired by. So there's a couple entree words that can maybe help somebody like me, maybe you, when we teach this in the corporate level. It helps people go, wow, I don't have to use the word appreciate because that sounds a little bit gooey, right? There's a lot of other alternatives there which set you up to tell the story for the person. So let's go into it. So the idea is simply this, like I call it a meaning maker narrative because it's really about telling the story that helps that person have meaning, that emotional context of meaning, feeling like you matter and belong. So first of all, we want to share the what. What did you observe? What was their behavior? What was the action that they took? And so I've listed on this chart, and I'll send it to everyone after, or I'll send it to Melanie afterwards and she share this. But I listed some of the alternatives of thinking through how I could do the voiceover to what did I see them do to literally catch them doing things right. And you can see a couple, selections there. And then secondly, when telling the story, this is kind of like, like Pixar and Disney, they have this formula like once upon a time, and then they launch into their story. So what I appreciate about you is once upon a time, and then they launch into the story like, here's what I saw, here's what I observed, and then how did the person do it? It's not just what they did. It's like, how did they do it? They exhibited a positive attitude. Man, they were calm in the middle of the storm. And then here's the last piece I want to share. That's the real connector emotionally. Why does it matter? Why amplifying meaning matters? And this is the part that sort of unlocked it for me. Was you made me and others feel valued. So here's an example. So let me just, Melanie, what I appreciate about you, or what I respected about you, okay, and I'm just, we're just role playing here. I noticed that you resolved a really difficult problem. I mean, we were up late at night, like scratching our heads, wondering how to do this. And you were the one that sort of came to the front here. It wasn't even your area of responsibility, but you took highly accountable ownership to do that. Like, this was out of your area and you owned it. And you got results when we needed them most. And I just want to thank you for that, because that made a big difference to me, as your supervisor and other people. And thank you. So I just went from great job to telling that story. Does that feel a little bit more robust in doing that?
Much better.
What's interesting, I have to tell you, Steve and I have been talking about this for over the course of probably the past month or so, 6 weeks, I don't know. And I've been practicing some of this that he's, that I've learned from him. And the results are pretty amazing. Like, I thought I was really good at giving appreciation and praise, just, because I'm not an introvert or a guy, Steve. So I was like, I got this. And then I learned your method and I was like, oh, I needed some work too, right? Again, not assuming labels. I love it.
So here's the thing, like, for somebody like me, I need to practice this all the time, because my zone of comfort needs to grow. And so the idea when I do this with people in a workshop on this subject, I talk about having eyes and ears to catch people doing things right everywhere in our life. So for example, if you go to the grocery store today and you notice the bagger, there's a long line of people at the cash register and the bagger is working ferociously, and yet they still put the eggs, they saved them for the last thing and put them on top and told you, hey, here's the eggs, don't break those. Hey, you know what? I noticed that we're super busy here today, and you put the eggs on top, and I just, I appreciate you recognizing that that's really important to me, and it makes me feel good about shopping here. So thank you. And watch what happens to them when you do that. Bam, their eyes fall out of their head. First of all, that you, waitress, waiters, somebody at your bank, people that you work with at school, a neighbor. I notice that you really take care of your garden bed out front. You're out there every Saturday morning before the birds are even up. And it kind of brightens my day to come out here with a cup of coffee and look at it. So the reinforcement is when you watch the reaction on their face in doing it, and then it gives me something back. Both of us get something. So I guess, this is Jonathan, this is totally, give to get, right? In a way, it's an opportunity to do that. So we want to try to practice with everyone we can. And then we can start doing it to family members. Kids even need this more than ever. But I guess I'll stop ranting here. But when you think about the idea of belonging and feeling included, you've just pulled that person closer to you. And you're giving them sort of a psychological boost of safety, because you've built some equity in your relationship together by recognizing what they did right. And when you think about scaling this across an entire culture, when everyone has this sort of mindset, what you're doing is you're reinforcing the behaviors that are expected around here. I'm going to do that again if somebody's recognized me for it. We're just human nature in that way, and a positive sort of carrot, not the stick approach. And I just think it's free, and it's just, it fits exactly where we need to be, I think, post-COVID, where people are really angry and their lightning rods are up, to be offended about everything. And so we need to go the opposite and take the extra time. So Any rate, I wanted to share that with y'all and ask, what are you, how does, any questions about this, and like, what might you be doing to help people feel included in your cultures, or what have you seen?
So I really appreciate, Steve, that you put it in a formula, right? Because I think a lot of us that have spent a lot of time working with culture and with people and leadership development, we preach these things a lot, but this is a very simple and effective formula to be clear about what we're looking for and how to give appreciation. Just kind of a funny story. The great job made me laugh because when I first met my husband and we moved in together, he is much more anal about like where everything goes in an organization than I am. And so he'd be like, "Oh, thank you, hon. Like, great job." Like he would just give like the little passing things. And then the thing that I remember the most was like, "Well, you didn't do this. So you didn't do that. You put that over there and it belongs over there. And you needed it." And I was like, "Oh my God, leave me alone." Would you say something nice? And he's like, "I tell you all the time." It wasn't resonating with me because he wasn't being as intentional about the positive things as he was about the negative. And that's something that I had to work on with him, because that's what I tell my leaders. So right now we have like a thank you board in my house where we write things like that. Like, "Thank you for doing this. It really made my job easier. Thank you for helping with the kids when you did this," right? "I was really stressed." So HR person here, right? Like I made a thank you board in our home. And I'm helping one of my clients right now build out even just their simple one-on-one framework, because they showed me their one-on-one framework. And it's basically like a lot of companies and a lot of leaders do is status updates. It's what are you doing here? What are you doing there? I'm like, great. All of that is really important in a one-on-one. Move it down and let's insert a whole section about like, how are you? What were some great things that happened this week? What are you excited about? What are some challenges you're facing? How are you feeling today? How can I support you in that? What are some goals that you'd like to achieve in the next 2 weeks before we meet again? And having that personal check-in to really just take time, one positive, right, that you've accomplished in the last week since we've talked, that you can bring attention to. Like that's so important in a one-on-one to build that relationship between leader and individual. And it's something that pretty much everyone I've seen that's brought me in completely skips over.
I'm going to piggyback off of Alexandra. There's actually a neuroscience basis in what you're saying about that draw of negativity. And it turns out that we are hardwired for this negativity bias. Like we can't help it unless we're aware of it, right? So that is very intriguing. And Steve, the language is critical. It is so critical. You could spend probably 5 years changing just the language in an organization, and it would totally change the culture. I love the grid, because we might feel something, and like you were describing earlier, I'm not really sure how I can say that or what's safe to say from an HR perspective. What language can you use? This is brilliant. It should be in a class.
Well, thank you. And Rachel had her hand up there.
Thank you. I worked for a company at one point, and it was an extremely positive environment. It was great. I really enjoyed it. But they used "great job" every day, all the time, and we're always throwing it out to everybody, making sure everybody heard it, really, just to, I guess, form that positive environment. So those words just became a usual thing, and the meaning was lost a little bit. So I guess all these words that you're introducing us to definitely gives it more meaning, because if you do hear it all day, every day, it just becomes normal and it loses its meaning a little bit. So I was just wondering what you would say about that.
Yeah, it sort of melts over time. Yeah, for sure, to hear great job. But people, when you say that to people, they usually know that they did a great job. So you're confirming, you're checking that box. But what was it specifically that they saw that they are acknowledging that was great about it? Those are the behaviors that I want to hear back, because then I understand what I should be doing going forward. Like, my boss really seems to be focused on this. Why every time they tell me this story of catching me doing things right, they seem to focus on, well, I kept delivering on time, delivering on time. Well, now I know that delivering on time is really important to expectation. Or they really like my out of the box thinking every single time. Well, so now I'm going to be more focused on delivering that. So, I mean, it's always about delivering on expectations, right? People want to know where that expectation is with their boss and others. And so when we recognize that behavior, we're clarifying that in a really easy, positive way.
I guess what you were just saying, actually, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I guess what you were just saying, then I realized the story was actually missing. They would give the, yeah, great job, that was really well done, but they didn't provide the story. So that's what was missing.
Yeah.
When I hear Steve saying these things, some of the stuff that jumps out to me too is past behavior predicts future behavior, right? And we're saying, like, we're setting expectations on what are the behaviors, right, that we want to see in our organization. And if we call those to the forefront, people are more likely to repeat them. So when I'm out there talking about, hey, if we can clone our best people, and Steve knows this language as well, we want them to know, well, what does cloning our best people outside of the scientific realm, right? What does that look like? If I could really create high performers that are engaged and are doing all these things to drive our strong culture, we've got to tell them what we mean, right? Yeah. We've got to tell them, hey, this is the stuff that we want you to repeat, because that culture, it happens when we're not looking, right? We can't be there to do it every single time and to watch every single move. We've got to hope that they do those on their own, which is the key to that. So that's why this is so powerful.
Yeah, when peers start doing this to each other, it's self-supporting. So the one aspect that we talked about is behavior of expectations, but the other, which the research is showing is even more important, is when you have meaning and purpose. So the one thing that's underestimated psychologically about people at work, you think of like, well, the purpose that I'm going to connect them to is how our company does their, saves the world, or how your work makes the company successful. That's great. But what they don't realize is that their purpose in work is to actually be to belong with their manager, to get approval from their manager. I know that sounds like unpopular or something, but we want approval from our manager. That is one of our underlying purpose-driven amplifiers. So when we hear that back, I'm immediately connected. I'm fulfilling my purpose with my manager, and that's meaningful for me. That's the emotional response, which is going to propel me, in the engagement world to do great things. So yeah, it's behavior expectation, but it's meaning and purpose too.
Yeah, and I would say your manager, your team, your clients, like everyone you're interacting with.
Yeah.
Which then drives the point of having strong leaders, right, Steve? Because if you've got the wrong leaders in place and your people are wanting to fulfill the needs and be recognized by that leader and perform the way your leader says, right? People don't leave companies, they leave bad leaders or leave bad managers, right? So the importance of having the right leaders on board to become even more important in driving your culture and in your creating your meaning and purpose.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
No doubt.
So I want to take us on a little bit of a different shift. So Steve, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this topic. I mean, I think we're all kind of enlightened by it, and hopefully we'll be able to use it going forward. My kind of thought, I guess, to everyone else then is, okay, we recognize that this sense of belonging is so important, and then our words are so important, and we can create this meaning maker narrative, right? Like we can create meaning in the work that we're doing. Are there other things that we're doing that are helping people feel that they belong in work culture? How are we driving that feeling of belonging? So Steve's is a tool that we can use. What else are we doing?
I'll
Yeah.
go. So I've done a lot of work on this too with launching Give to Get. And what we've found is that talent that thinks and acts generously is more valuable to companies. So, that whole selflessness and inclusion aspect of culture, how do you generate a culture of selflessness and inclusion? You have to revamp the way that the culture thinks about their relationships with people. And how it's really come down to is, the actions that you take to proactively help others within your organizations. I mean, organizations that have a strong interest in fostering a giving behavior. There was a meta-analysis done at the University of Arizona that examined 38 studies of organizational behavior. This is like greater than 3,500 business units across multiple industries, found that higher rates of giving were predictive of higher unit profitability, productivity, efficiency, customer satisfaction, along with lower costs and turnover rates. So when employees act like givers, they facilitate efficient problem solving and coordination and build cohesive, supportive cultures that appeal to customers, suppliers, and top talent. So that was a Adam Grant Harvard Business Review in the company of givers and takers. And it really just shows, and you spoke to the pandemic, and one stat that came across from the predictive index was a study that they did with their Optima recently was 25% of the existing workforce today is sheltering in place. Think about that. That means that 25% of people in organizations today are going to leave their company in 2021. This is going to be a huge, tsunami effect of turnover, right? And so there's a huge disconnect right now between talent and employers, and it's not getting any. I mean, there's a big problem that companies have to solve right now before they continue to bleed out talent. So
Good information.
that's my feedback. I think it's really about selflessness. It's really about thinking and acting generously.
Yep.
Right? Thinking about what's important to others. How do I contribute to your mission and do so without expecting anything in return? So I think that's really what it comes down to, as well as what you were talking about making people feel welcome. How do you do that? You give. You show that, what is important to them is more important than what's important to you. Check your ego and contribute to the missions of others first.
That's really important. I'm going to piggyback off of that. One thing that I do regularly is I include personal stuff in my one-on-ones. We make the mistake of thinking that we hire workers. People show up and they bring everything with them. Problems with children, problems with parents. And I regularly included that because it made it more meaningful, right? It made our half hour every other week more meaningful. And the other thing that I saw a desperate lack of, thank you. Thank you for showing up every day this week. And thank you for knocking it out of the park. And I used to give every month a handwritten thank you note that I printed off the computer with a silly thing on it and a $10 Wawa card. And I had people in tears because they were so grateful that I was grateful, because I couldn't do this job by myself. I couldn't knock this out of the park myself. You all knocked it out of the park. And I think from a leadership perspective, lots of learning needs to occur at that level. I know you're a big thank you, Steve. I think you'll agree with me. You're a big thank you guy.
Yeah, there's an expression that you probably heard that's probably appropriate for that, and also what Jonathan said, but it's called "Give me my roses now." Don't wait. We think about people that have passed, and that's when you get their roses and the accolades, right? Which is appropriate and part of our culture. Give them to them now, and maybe they won't be walking out the door saying, I'll tell you real quickly. So I left this one company that I loved, and they had a going away party for me. Everyone's there drinking, a fun time. They get up and make speeches about Steve, right? How wonderful I was. And I'm driving down the Pennsylvania Turnpike after this party literally into the sunset, thinking, geez, if I had known all that, I would never have resigned and moved on to the other offer that I got. And there's no freaking way. I want my roses now. So that I think there's a lesson in that for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We call that in HR, right? We call that, you can't just do the reactive exit interviews, right? You have to do the stay interviews. Why do I still want to be here? Why do I want to make sure that, and how do I proactively make those changes? Sorry, Steve, I'll say I love hearing that, but I don't love hearing it, but glad you did get that feedback eventually. Sad that that's kind of what we've resorted to. Alex, what were you going to say?
I was going to say on the volunteer piece that Jonathan brought up, when I was working for an organization that was well known for their volunteer work in the community, they were also well known for some of the biggest brands that you would get to work on, the biggest CPG brands. And people would come in and they would comment less about the CPG brands and more often about their excitement of being able to volunteer. Oh, I love all the volunteering you do. When do we get to do that? Can I join the volunteering committee? So that it's an interesting thing that you don't necessarily think of, but it makes sense that the data supports that, because that was often what I saw. And at one point, one of the main organizations we supported, it was Ronald McDonald House. The CEO was angry because one of our leaders left and went to Ronald McDonald House. And we'd had a long partnership, and he didn't like the way it went down, and he pulled all the funding. And pretty much maybe 6 top performers left. And I'd say maybe 10 other people after that, because they were so, the culture just did a complete shift after that move. So.
Recognizing the impact of our behaviors, right? Alex, that's so key. This reminds me of the story. I think I tell it in my book a little bit as well, but when I was working for my small design firm, we were going to go to it was actually the Free Store Food Bank, which shout out to them, our proceeds from this meeting today are going to go to the Free Store Food Bank. So it's funny that this is my one big story I always tell about them too. And I had went to my leadership, and we planned to give everyone a half day of volunteer time, right? You hear about that, companies giving people, paid time off to go do it. And we were excited. We were giving everybody half day, and we're in a billable environment. So that was always a challenge. If we don't let our, 40-ish Cincinnati employees bill for the day, what's going to happen to the numbers? And I went in and I was talking to my leader that beginning of that week, and he said, we cannot let our team go to this volunteer event. We just can't do it. And I said, we've been planning this for weeks. We have to let them go. And he kept saying, show me the numbers. Show me the numbers that if we go to this, that I'm still going to meet my quarterly numbers. And he got in his palm, he said, I think we should hire temps, let them go do the Free Store Food Bank. And then the Free Store Food Bank gets their workers, and our people stay working and they get the billable hours. And he said, it's a triangle of happiness. And I went, that's a triangle of crap. I said, you have to recognize the intrinsic value of going and giving to your community, right? They want to give back. They want to do these things. There's no way. And he just kept saying, show me the numbers. It was like a Jerry Maguire moment, right? Show me the numbers, show me the numbers. And finally, I talked him off the ledge. This whole conversation, by the way, happened in front of a new hire, which was mortifying to say the least. So we go to the event. We have an amazing event. We take pictures and the team's bonding. We made 2,500 power packs that day, which are the food packs for kids that don't get to eat on a regular basis. It was moving. It was awesome. The team loved it. And he on the way home, and I remember this is a very boisterous, loud boss, he called me and it was like dead silence on the other end of the phone. I'm like, is everything okay? And he said, you're right. I'm like, say it again. He said, you're right. He said, man, it felt good. There is some intrinsic value to that. And I said, show me the numbers, right? Like, you show me the numbers. And I couldn't at that time, right, physically say to him, well, it's going to help all those things, productivity and turnover and absenteeism. Like, we're building it. Well, we went on to achieve a Best Place to Work award, which was huge, but we didn't know at the time how that was going to unveil itself. But that's another just example of sometimes you have to not put the cart before the horse, right? You have to build into people. You have to do the right things, and showing the metrics behind it is sometimes difficult. Yeah. I want to be sensitive to everyone's timing here, and we can kind of stay after a little bit and talk a little bit more if you have a moment. But just to kind of give us a little bit of a wrap up, if you will, because I'm sure, I don't know about you guys, I could talk about this all day. I'm sure that we could, and it's a wonderful way to start the day. I appreciate that we already kind of mentioned, I don't need to say much about it, but I did get my book launch, which was exciting, and Cards for Culture are coming out. What I realized was we just needed some tangible things to help people deliver, just like Steve's tool that we can put in people's hands, right? Because culture can be elusive sometimes. So when we have those, Alex is actually working on a event right now where we're going to create a certification for culture champions, where people can actually get certified. And we're probably gearing that towards HR leaders, small business leaders, right? Where you can become a certified culture leader. Would love any input and help around that as Alex has helped, thank you, Alex, for your work and contributing in that piece. And we want to keep these conversations going. So hopefully we'll have this about every month. Definitely keep a lookout on Eventbrite for these kinds of meetings, sharing about culture with leaders. And now we can now say around the country, right? Colorado, a lot of Cincinnati, but Philadelphia, we're so happy to have you guys. And then the bonus is just the partnership with the Free Store Food Bank. So we can feed into others, right? Just as we're kind of feeding into our own hearts and helping create better workplaces, we can do that for others. So I think even just with this meeting alone, if I'm doing some quick math, we'll be able to have about 80 meals for people that would have otherwise not had those just from what we did today. And this is a relatively small group, but think about how we're impacting others, right? Yeah, thank you. So don't feel like you need to continue on here. I mean, I'm so appreciative for everyone joining in. Thank you for your time. And we'll kind of just wrap up with any final thoughts that you guys might have.
I have a final thought.
Yes.
What is so you said meeting monthly, and it's all around culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have, like, some ideas of what specific topics are going to be coming up?
I've been doing it just based on like what I'm hearing what people need and what they want to talk about. Sometimes it's just sharing, right? When we all get together, how amazing it is to share good ideas. So in this example, I knew Steve had some amazing tools. I wanted him to be able to speak. And I was so thankful that he, could reach out to even, amazing people like Dr. Laura, right? And then pulling all of you guys in. I'm kind of doing it as we go. I've had a couple people reach out that when I hear little pieces of interest in their nature of their work, that I'm wanting to pull them in. So if you have ideas, would love to hear it. I think it's just that continuing, we see what's happening with culture. We see how important it is. I like Steve's post-COVID language, right? It's more important now than ever. And we need to make sure that we're figuring out how to make it a priority, going forward.
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you have ideas, like things that you'd like to see, another topic?
Not particularly. I think that, it's really about bringing in some takeaways that, like Steve, the biggest takeaway with Steve was pretty simple. It was, hey, we need to create an environment where people feel welcome and appreciated,
Mm-hmm.
and do it in a way in which, it's all about how you make them feel to bring out the best in people, right? So that's a huge takeaway, with specific actions that you can take to generate that feeling. And so I think it's great to have like these type topics that people can really understand. It's very simple, but then it can resonate and they can deliver it within their own environment. So that would be my thought on just when we do pick topic, or when you do pick topics, or it's something that is along those lines. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't want it to be too broad, but like for me, it's how do we be intentional about culture, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but I hear a lot of, I'm really good with people and I trust my gut and I can do all this. And it's like magic, right? But there's some tangible things that we need to be doing to drive a strong culture. So Steve gave us some examples. We're all talking about intentional culture driving. And that's what I think comes out of this today, right? This isn't pie in the sky. This is, we know how to do things so that the rubber meets the road. And that is encouraging.
Well, I want to say thank you to Steve for his insight and reminders of how you should conduct yourself when you're around people you're trying to appreciate and value them. There's a lot of ways to do that verbally. So thank you, Steve. And Melanie, thanks for putting this together. I would be interested in a future discussion about what I call the culture business model. Business performance model. I would, if we ever had decided to have a discussion about a culture business performance model, I'm all in to have that conversation.
When you say that, Paul, tell me more. Like, what does something like that look like to you? How to ensure that you have a culture plan? Is that what you mean within your organization?
Yeah, that would be part of it. But
Okay.
it would be focused on business performance. Culture equals better business performance.
So Paul, I think you mean that this manifestation of appropriate or good culture should be tied to everybody's major business objectives. This should be tied to their performance, just like your productivity and your other stuff. You're rated on that and you get a number, your boss evaluates you on that. There should be some way I kind of incorporated it, and I've worked 2 places that was an actual performance metric. Are you behaving the way we say we want people to behave here? Say please, say thank you, be respectful. So is that what you're talking about, Paul?
That's some of it, yes. I think I'm looking at a organization's overall performance objectives and saying, okay, where does culture fit into that picture? And I don't mean to start a discussion now. I'm just saying if you ever come back together, a meaningful topic for me, because I envision my taking this performance model to clients and saying, let's have a conversation about culture in your organization. And let's use this culture business performance model to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think the predictive index, I just became a partner, and what they talk about is have organizations have business strategy that eventually would get to business results. And what do you think makes a difference between the strategy becoming the results that they desire?
Culture.
Yeah, so my interest is in trying to put this on a piece of paper, and so I can visually see what it is.
Okay. Yeah, so it's people, it's talent optimization is what it's all about.
That's part of it.
Yeah. So you can design the right team and optimize that talent through inspire and hire, and you can either have the right team in place or you can shift your team around to get the right team in place. You can hire to that or you can shift it. So there's a lot to it, but I would encourage you to check out the talent optimization model of the predictive index. It's pretty sharp.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Again,
you.
if you have that discussion, if you decide to have that discussion, Melanie, I'm all in to have that discussion.
Absolutely. Let me
Make some
think on that
visuals
too and
about
figure out, I know there's parts of it that I can lead, but I want to see if I can even find people that do it better than I do, right? That can pull in some knowledge around how do we show and drive the business performance, because I can show some of that, but a little bit that goes back to the show me the number, right? Which I think is kind of what you're saying, Paul, like people want to see that too. And I have some good studies and stats that I'm thinking of as well that might show it. So,
Sure.
Melanie,
right.
I think I could send you some data.
Dr. Laura, I would love that. And maybe that's even, if we have continued conversation, maybe that's something that, you could help me lead a conversation down the road around it too.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop the video. I appreciate everyone so much joining us today. This has been amazing. And I think that when we are intentional about culture and we do all these great things, I know that together we can thrive. And I appreciate you guys joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Good meeting all of you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everyone needs to practice on your grocery store clerk or somebody today just to get this underneath while you're still thinking about it. So, and maybe it's a family member. So go for it. And I'll send the grid to Melanie.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Steve.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you for
All right,
coming.
thank you.
All right.